me this one's going to go big.
Nose, throat, and accessory organs not adversely affected by smoking Chesterfields. First such report ever published about any cigarette, and it applies only to Chesterfield.
A responsible consulting organization reports this study by a competent medical specialist and his staff on the effects of smoking Chesterfields. A group of people smoked only Chesterfields for 6 months in their normal amount, 10 to 40 a day. 45% of the group have smoked Chesterfields from 1 to 30 years for an average of 10 years each. At the beginning and end of the 6 months period, each smoker was given a thorough examination, including x-rays. The examination covered the sinuses, nose, ears, and throat. After a thorough examination of every member of the group, the medical specialist stated, "It is my opinion that the ears, nose, throat, and accessory organs of all participating subjects examined by me were not adversely affected in the 6 months period by smoking the cigarettes provided." Remember this report and buy Chesterfields, regular or king size. Premium quality Chesterfield, much milder.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. So then, the TLDR for this video is all contained in the title, which is "Gambling would be illegal if it were invented today." That's the whole premise of this video, and it's kind of the end of what you might consider a series of videos that started very early on the old channel. So let me just bring that up. I have got a lot of stuff to get through in this video. I think I've got it all ready, but bear with me. I will do my best to make it coherent and not go on for too long. But back in April 2018, so that was within 5 months of starting the original Degsy Degworth channel, I made this video about EastEnders, which was supposed to be just a video. What a great fruit machine this was, you know, really good fun, entertaining. It was the glory day of amusement with prizes when there was actually some amusement in there. But as I was recording that, I thought, look, I can't do this without being honest about the flip side of this. It's all very well to wax lyrical about how great these games were in terms of their design, the way that they put them together with the features and the sound and the samples and the way that they kind of hooked you in and got you playing. It was all very clever stuff, but you can't do that without talking about the harm and addiction potential of gambling, of fruit machines. And that video contained a short section which essentially was, as I put it there, the progenitor of the Gambling Low Ebb series, because I felt that I couldn't make that video without talking honestly about that example that I gave there. Was the time I nearly completely fucked up an early date with the future Mrs. Degsy when I very nearly lost all my money in the arcade on the way to one of our very first dates together, and I just about dragged myself out of the arcade before I lost my last £20 in the world, which if I had lost that would have meant that I couldn't afford to have taken Mrs. Degsy to the cinema. So I felt at that time, and that was quite a few years ago there, April 2018, that I couldn't make that video without being honest about that side of things. Now, there's been more videos over the years that have gone into that space. Obviously, the Gambling Low Ebb series itself. Also, more recently, I've made that video, which was The Gambling Monster Will Never Stop Chasing You. There was the Gambling Is Now Very Expensive video, and most recently, the UK gambling industry goes from bad to worse. And now for this video, I kind of have this in my head that I want to try and on some level box this subject off, because I've now reached the conclusion, which is essentially the title of this video. And what I'd like to do on one level is kind of move on from this now as a subject, because we've got the answers, or at least in my head, I think I've worked out now where we are on this, and I've made some conclusions. I've got quite a bit of evidence that I want to go through, and my feeling is now that the position of gambling in society, it is given an incredibly easy ride in terms of visibility, in terms of accessibility, in terms of how it can be advertised and promoted, and how available it is when you compare and contrast it with something like, say, smoking. That's why we had the old smoking advert on the front of this video, because we all know where smoking is now in society. It is still legal. You can still smoke if you want to smoke, but I'm sure we've all seen the displays now, such as they aren't. When you go into the shop, they all have to be behind sort of roller blinds or something like that so that you can't see them. You have to ask for them specifically. There's no advertising. So it's available, but we're at the spot now as a society where we say, look, we all kind of accept that this thing is really bad. You shouldn't be doing it, but we're not going to ban it outright. My contention here is that gambling needs to go into the same bucket, as it were.
Bet365.com. It's all about the in-play. It's all about the next goal, the number of corners, the match goals, the final score, the next goal method, the number of cards, the next goal scorer, the full-time result. Hold on. The latest live odds are coming up on your screen now. Bet365 offer over 50 in-play markets. Bet365.com. Bet in play. Now.
And not least because there's shit like this going on. This is only from October 25, so this is quite recent, and this was the chief executive of the UK Betting and Gaming Council giving evidence to a Treasury Select Committee. See the article on your screen there, and it came down to this simple question, which was asked twice just to make sure that there was no confusion, because the answer seemed to make no sense, because Meg Hillier, the committee's chair, then checked that she had understood Hurst's position correctly and asked, do you think there are any social ills associated with gambling? The lobbyist replied, no. So let's try this on for size. Gambling in the UK causes significant societal harms, including widespread debt, mental and physical health issues, relationship breakdowns, job loss, and increased crime, costing the economy billions of pounds annually. Harms affect not just gamblers, but also families, communities, and society, impacting finances, health, education, and leading to increased burdens on justice and health systems, with some groups like the poor, homeless, and those with mental health issues disproportionately affected. Or, alternatively, you can have this, where the industry lobbyist, the gambling industry lobbyist, is asked, do you think there are any social ills associated with gambling? The lobbyist replied, no. And that is obviously a lie. That is just a bald-faced lie. She knows that she's lying. She has to lie, because that is the line that the industry needs to go for. Because if they admit any of that shit there, then the conversation goes into a different place. There's also been a thread over at Desert Island Fruits called State of Seaside Arcades. This was started in September last year by Vetra666 there, and he was talking about the appalling state of modern seaside arcades. Now, I had a good chat about seaside arcades, and specifically Blackpool, in the video that I made about Omega, and had a little tour around the Blackpool arcades that I remember from when they were in their heyday, and the state that they were in when I last visited them sometime around the mid to late 2000s. The thread that Vetra started here, over at Desert Island Fruits, kind of covered a lot of the same ground, which was the absolute state of them these days, which is very little in the way of anything that isn't gambling or some form of gambling adjacent activity, generally accessible by children as well. The thing that really made me do a what the fuck is that is this picture that was posted by Slots Magic. And he's saying here that he walked through the forum in Bridlington ticket area and spotted these. And these are, can you see, these are ticket jackpot games, which are, of course, playable by children. And what you can see there is that they are essentially digital slot machines. If you put that into the pub and gave it a £100 jackpot instead of a 1600 ticket jackpot, you would have a sort of digicab random game. And I would be entirely in agreement with comments such as this made by the Altered Emu, which is very simply, that is so bad. Fuck the gateway drugs, let's go straight to the heroin. That's basically a random slot machine. Slots Magic went back to get this picture, and it gets worse. You can see there, to be clear, this is in the children's area of the arcade. It looks like that, and this is the help screen. This game has an average payout of 30%. Now, they fall under Category D, so I went to the Gambling Commission website. There's the information about Cat D. Covers things like crane-type machines as well, and also these ticket machines. The relevant section is there, is that your stake can be 10p for a money prize, up to a maximum prize of £5. A non-money prize can go up to 30p with a maximum prize of £8. Or the crane grab machines can be £1 a go with a maximum prize of £50. So what we're effectively doing here is defining what child gambling can look like. This is the acceptable face of kiddie casinos, which leads to machines like that there. Literal junior digital slot machine cabinets that are running at a 30% payout. Now, this conversation went on for a little bit, and it was about this time that I was formulating in my head that I wanted to make another video about this. So the conversation did go in some different directions there. For example, that UK gambling firms spent £2 billion advertising in the UK last year. Slots Magic got these graphics here from that article. These are the Premier League shirt sponsors, so Premier League football clubs. In the 1992 to 93 season, there is not a single gambling sponsor of a Premier League football club, and there wouldn't be until the early 2000s. For the 2024 to 2025 season, it looks like that. Gambling sponsors now represent 55% of Premier League shirt sponsors. And Slots Magic then went out and did a little bit of sleuthing to try and get some video footage of what was going on inside this arcade so that we could get a better look of what the current state of play was. Now, one thing you will see here, just looking around that arcade, is there are no video games, there's no pinballs, there's nothing. These are all just fruit machines, crane machines, gambling style products. There is nothing here that isn't gambling. Now, the idea was going to be that he would get some of the help screens and stuff like that, but he was rudely interrupted by the owner, who did not like him filming in there. Just from what we can see is that it's what, 98%, 99% gambling devices. Mostly on either a £5 jackpot. Can you see there that those machines are on a ticket payout? You can see there, so they're set to tickets or the £5 cash jackpot. And unfortunately, at that point, he is accosted by the owner and effectively told to stop filming. There are product sheets for these things as well. Here's something from the Electrocoin website. Bar X Diamond tickets, which, as you can see there, is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically a fruit machine, a triple player fruit machine, converted or designed to pay out tickets, which makes it ideal for FECs. Now, FEC is a family entertainment centre, leisure venues available in 10p, 20p play. So remember, that falls inside the definition of Category D. So you can cite a triple player child gambling machine that pays out tickets. And there's a picture from a real-based ticket payout machine in an arcade, which says this machine has an average percentage payout of at least 35% or greater. And we've been having a few chats about things like this over at Desert Island Fruits. This thread here was started by Boulder Dash in November, which was that Wetherspoons made more than £73 million from fruit machines in its latest financial year. There is this article here out of Coinslot, and you can see there that fruit machine revenues increased by 12.4%. And in this thread here, the Altered Emu took a picture at his local spoons. You can see there 3 machines lined up in spoons. In my experience last time I was in the UK, spoons generally had 3 or 4 machines per pub. Coinslot, as the industry mouthpiece, has been running quite a few articles like this. Their latest spin on this is that working class gaming is under attack, because as we've discussed in previous videos, these AGCs, adult gaming centres, are massively clustered in poorer areas. If you go to the leafy suburbs, you do not find any of these things. They are highly concentrated in poorer areas, and their line on this one is that attacking adult gaming centres is attacking the working class. Their line here being, campaigners distort the reality of what AGCs are and whom they serve. Far from dens of vice, AGCs are modest community-based venues offering low-stakes gambling in a supervised, alcohol-free setting. They occupy a unique and misunderstood niche in the UK's gambling landscape, one that deserves fair consideration in the policy debate. This is part of the industry, remember, where that lady stood up in front of the select committee and said that there are absolutely no societal ills associated with gambling. And to me, these are all part of the same problem, which is the gamblification of everything. The fact that you can only win tickets out of the machine so that they get through on a technicality in that regard, that they're putting that layer of abstraction between your stake and your prize. If these were straight cash machines where you could win £100 jackpot, you would go up into the adult gaming category. But we have this 10p, £5 thing, and specifically the ticket thing, whereby they can still be accessible by children, and the RTP goes straight out the window and we can go down as low as 30%. Now, the argument that might be made there, and indeed is made, is that because the children are only playing for tickets, it doesn't really count as gambling. But that is a specious argument. That's entirely false, and we can look elsewhere in society for this gamblification of an increasing number of activities, of things that traditionally would have no gambling elements to them, that is being added because it is inherently appealing to people. On some basic level, we are risk takers because from an evolutionary perspective, that has rewarded us. So a little bit of our brains are hardwired to take chances because it's worked for us to get to the top of the food chain, as it were. So we all have that in us, but for a significant minority of people, it can become particularly addictive and therefore destructive. So I've been casting my net a little bit wider here. I'm going to play you a short section from this excellent video by the CoffeeZilla channel about exposing the gambling epidemic.
And for the ones who get addicted, it's financially devastating. One recent study looked at Americans' finances before and after sports betting was legalized by their state. They found that bankruptcy rates rise approximately 10% after legalization. Another paper looked at financial stability, noting that for households that do bet, they spend on average about $720 a year sports betting. And the study found that for every dollar someone deposits for betting, there's a reduction in net investments of just under $1. As people gamble more, they invest less, which means their financial future is worse. Makes sense. But this is especially true of problem gamblers or gambling addicts. To be clear, this is not something that affects all gamblers. Roughly 1% of the world population suffers from this. It's more common among people who bet regularly and bet online, two of the things that sports gambling encourages. Problem gambling completely obliterates people's finances and affects more than just the gambler, because as they beg, borrow, or steal to continue their addiction, they affect everyone around them. And I do mean steal. Roughly half of gambling addicts will commit a crime, and most of those crimes are to continue gambling, often leading to a spiral where the addict doesn't see a way out, which is why problem gambling has one of the highest suicide rates of any substance addictions. Full stop.
Now, that's focused on the US market. There was a whole section about sports gambling in the Gambling Monster Will Never Stop Chasing You video, but it's kind of everywhere. I've just picked up a couple of other examples here. This is about the game Hearthstone. Hearthstone is a digital card collecting battle style game. I played it for many, many years. I eventually dropped out of it because the game design and the monetization of it was getting increasingly scummy, and I just refused to partake of it anymore. But since I quit, several years ago now, it got even worse, and they have now put what is essentially gambling into the game. So this video here by this guy, Zeddy Hearthstone, basically what they've done is they've added a pet into the game. It's that, see that little dinosaur fella there? You can get that pet and you can have him on the board. It's a cosmetic, and it's something that you can add to your side of the game, and your opponent will be able to see it as well. It's just a cute little thing. But rather than sell you the cosmetics, or okay, give us a 10 or a 20 quid or whatever amount of money it is that to sell you the thing, they decided instead to essentially introduce a gambling mechanic. And you can see here that we've had a deep dive into deconstructing the odds that resulted in a literal complicated spreadsheet onto how this thing works. And the way that they've done it is they've weighted the things that you get out of the gift pack in such a way that your chances of getting the pet on the first pull of the slot, as it were, the first gamble, is very close to zero. Can you see there? 0.1%, 0.14, 0.24. So you spend more and more money, and they change the weightings. But can you see there, at the point that you've spent $108, your chance of having got the pet is only 6.67%. And then when you do the final pulls, which cost you another $50, it then guarantees the payout, the jackpot, if you will, of that little King Crush pet dinosaur thing. That then goes to 100%. But at that point, you have spent $158 to get that little thing there on your board. Now, the only reason that we actually know these odds is that Blizzard, the scumbags who make this game, are legally obliged now to reveal the odds behind the scenes on these things in some territories. So you have to get the information out of the game or the help sheets in the territories where they have to tell you these things. And they have put that behind a gambling mechanic. And that apparently was quite successful, because that video there was released 6 months ago in June 25. They have repeated that now more than once, and they are continuing to put a little cosmetic for your board behind a gambling mechanic. So the point here is that, like the ticket machines, you don't need to get too hung up here on the fact that you're not gambling money for money. The important point here is the gambling mechanic. It is introducing these gambling mechanics that some people in particular are very, very vulnerable to. And what Blizzard here have clearly worked out, and this obviously did its job because they've stuck with this model, is they would rather have a relatively small minority of people. It may only be 10% or 5% of their player base is vulnerable to this kind of psychological manipulation, but they would rather get, say, $158 out of 10% of the player population than just charging maybe a straight $10 and have a far higher take-up. It's more commercially viable to them. They will make more money out of this by targeting the people who are vulnerable to the psychology of gambling. This is another very good video as well here by this young guy, Drew Gooden, The Online Gambling Epidemic. Like with the CoffeeZilla video, I would recommend watching the whole thing, but I will just play you a short section of this.
A lot of the higher-ups at these companies will refuse any responsibility for creating new gambling addicts over the past few years. They'll make the argument that they're just addicted to their phone, and our app just happens to be on it.
I don't believe that there is an addiction to mobile betting any more than there is an addiction to utilization of your phone for any other reason.
You don't think adding a layer of betting makes the phone more addictive than just tooling around Instagram?
No. There is problem gambling. It is a real problem. Whether it's gotten bigger or it's just become more noticeable because sports betting is legal, I think is an unknown.
Really?
Yeah, that sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? You will note here that none of the people running these shows or their lobbyists, their various industry shills and all the rest of it, none of them will ever admit that they are even remotely part of the problem. Whilst the boss of Bet365 last year received pay and compensation of £280 million. One rare voice of somebody within the industry or a former person from within the industry actually having some degree of honesty about it is this guy here. I'll read this out to you. Stuart Kenny, a founder of the bookmaker Paddy Power, now retired, said that he regretted some of the things I did while working in the sector, but that he had resigned from the group's board in 2016 after 29 years because he did not believe the company was protecting problem gamblers enough. When you open an account to have a bet on the next general election or Manchester United to win the Premiership, within 24 hours, bookmakers send you free spins in the casino to the online slots, he told the committee. It's rather like going into a bar for your first drink and having a shandy, and the barman says, why not have a triple strength brandy on the house? Now, in America, where there really are very, very little in the way of regulations to protect the population, they've even now introduced this idea where you can have a bet on your credit card bill. So you can try and get some or all of your credit card bills settled by gambling on it. Obviously, the company in the middle takes a cut out of it, and if you lose, you're worse off than you were before. It almost sounds farcical, like outside the realms of reality, and yet it is a thing. It's this organisation here called Covered.
They say we disrupt personal finance through gamification, starting by letting people bet against their bills. Guys, you can now gamble on your credit card balance. If you're lucky enough and you win, you may get out of debt. If not, they're going to drive you further into it.
Welcome to Covered, where everyday finances become fun and rewarding. First, link your card through Plaid. Next, pick a transaction in game for a chance to win it back. It's a fun way to make money management feel more like a game and less like a chore.
I cannot even start to explain how gross and disgusting this is. This user puts it best and was retweeted by the official Covered account. A16C backed Covered lets users get up to 100% cash back on credit card purchases by offering fun and interactive games of chance. I downloaded the app. It's just gambling. And the worst part is you can't even use the old, don't invest what you can't afford to lose or whatever the gamble people say, because you're literally investing money you can't afford to lose because by definition you're already in debt if you're using their app. If you're gambling money on bills that you otherwise couldn't pay normally, like it's like, hey, am I going to pay rent this month or am I going to try to just kind of risk it all for a quick flip on Covered? I mean, this product is straight out of a dystopian sci-fi novel where people are flipping a coin on their rent. I mean, we're one step away from that.
And the thing is, this is not a new phenomenon. I think it's worse now than it's ever been. I think we are being failed on a biblical scale by our governments and our regulators and the people who should be keeping a lid on shit like this. But it has been going on forever. I am a subscriber to the Old School Nudgers group on Facebook. There are public pages that you can see just by joining the group, and if you pay a small amount of money in a subscription every month, you get access to the subscribers area. I've got no problem with that. The guy who runs the Old School Nudgers group says, look, I'm spending quite a bit of money getting around the place, buying these old publications, spending time and kit to get it digitised and uploaded. So he does ask for a small contribution to the subscribers area, which I have been paying for several months now. And one of the things that he's been doing is digitising old issues of Coinslot. Now, I have been going back through these things like decades, even back as far as the 1970s. There has always been a group of people, concerned people within society, be they MPs or representatives of gambling addiction groups or whatever, who have said, hang on a minute, folks, we've got a problem here with the prevalence of fruit machines. Because what I want to do here is just bring the scope back to the UK side of things. I've gone a little bit out of bounds there, just to show you that this idea of the gamblification, introducing gambling mechanics to anything and everything, is inherently appealing to a dangerously addictive level to a minority of people, but a significant minority of people are vulnerable to this kind of thing. The problem with fruit machines, of course, is that we're also then snaring children in that net as well. I am in my 50s now, and the older you get, I think when you look back, you realise how, particularly in your teenage years, you kind of didn't have a clue. You sort of didn't know your arse from your elbow. So the idea that we should have this sector of gambling, the AWP, the amusement with prizes, and the forms now that it's morphed into with digital ticket slot machines, there has always been a group of people who have been saying, hang on a minute, folks, this isn't right. Now, this one here is one single example that I've pulled from the Coinslot archives, whereby in Birmingham, the city council was basically saying, look, we have had enough of these kiddie gambling dens, the amusement arcades, and we want to do something about it. And BACTA, the trade organisation, stepped in, and it was reported thusly. Remember here that what we're talking about is defending the right for children to gamble, and for some of those children to inevitably become addicted to gambling. And remember that list there that I read through earlier in the video. This is what's being defended here, exposing children to a form of gambling that for some of them is inevitably going to result in that list of horrors there. BACTA has sprung to the defence of several thousand AWP machines in the Birmingham area threatened with an under-18s ban in a private bill a local authority is seeking to push through Parliament. And you can see the rest of the article there. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. By all means, pause the video and read it. But essentially, it's saying, no, we want to keep our kiddie gambling. Thank you very much. And here's BACTA again, leaping to the defence of the poor, hard-done-to gambling industry. BACTA chairman Malcolm Kravis told them, in fairness to your many ratepayers and other adults who derive a great deal of harmless fun from coin-operated machines, we ask you to reconsider this policy resolution. Now, here's another one from November 1986, and at this time there were the first chats going on about the increase in stake from 10p to 20p, which of course, as we know, didn't actually happen until 1990. On the surface here, it sounds like Coinslot are, in their comment section here, arguing for responsible gambling, but if you actually read the words, it's kind of like, hang on a minute, folks, we're already getting in trouble here for promoting child gambling. Maybe we should keep quiet on the whole doubling the stake thing. So we have it here. The 20p play stake increasing from the present 10p is widely tipped. We have already stated in this column that we oppose such an idea, and we've been in some hot water for it. Apparently it is something large sectors of the business is looking for this year. We oppose it because we think it's totally crazy at a time when the trade is being lambasted in the press for teaching youngsters how to gamble, allegedly. In the face of that kind of publicity, to ask to have the stake doubled is plain daft. So you can see there what they're saying is, look folks, keep your heads down. We're already in trouble over the whole kiddie gambling thing. Maybe we should just keep the stake where it is. Just keep quiet and we might be all right. Now, we're back in 1989 for this one. It's quite a long article, this, so I won't read the whole thing out. Obviously, you can just pause the video if you want to read down. I'll make it large enough on screen so that you can actually see it all properly. And there is the rest of that article there. It's the worst kind of inverted commas research. It's like, you already know what the answer is, now find a question that tells us what we want to hear. The amusement industry, like every other responsible and successful industry, must always be aware that there are one or two young people who, for various complex reasons, lose control. Just try and get your head around that sentence. You are literally putting a highly addictive and quite manipulative form of gambling. I've talked about this so much on the channel, about this very pernicious design of compensated machines. There is a whole video on the channel about the evil of compensated fruit machines. You're putting these things in front of children, or as you phrase it here, young people, and then almost throwing up your hands and saying, oh, I can't believe it. For various complex reasons, they've lost control, but only one or two of them, it's fine. And if you thought the government was going to step in and do the right thing, I'm afraid I've got bad news for you, because the Home Office has given notice that it is to oppose Clause 16 of the Birmingham Bill, which seeks an under-18s ban on all AWP machines. There is that article there, and in the end, the relevant, well, let's be slightly careful what I say, conversations were had between the industry and the, inverted commas, correct people in government, and the Home Office decided that it would oppose Birmingham Council. Remember, Birmingham Council here was basically saying, actually, we've had enough of these kiddie gambling dens, these kiddie casinos. We're going to make it illegal for children to gamble. And the Home Office said, we'd really rather you didn't do that, thank you very much. And here's Coinslot providing a useful toilet paper alternative for decades, saying here, the findings might not make sensational copy for those newspaper editors used to wrongly linking arcades with suicide, drug addiction and other social grievances, but they do prove a point which cannot be ignored, and to that end, Bacta and the industry at large must now go on the offensive. And it's all here in the language. You can see that they know full well that they've basically got a dirty product here, that they're sort of selling a drug. Gambling is a drug. It fires the same synapses in the brain and it leads to addiction in the same way. You can see with the language here, councillors are still quibbling over, and you can see there they've used inverted commas, moral issues in many planning applications, and it is essential that such feelings are dispelled once and for all. Just listen to this. After all, it is far easier to market a product that has a clean image than one which is tainted. Image is all important, and public opinion can be swayed by effective presentation. Do you see now why I started the video with that nonsensical old cigarette advertisement. There's a whole load of shit like that before they actually banned tobacco advertising on TV, and they could put horseshit advertisements out like that at a time when the industry knew they were selling death. They knew they were selling infirmity, illness, cancer, early death, all kind of health issues, and they went with the presentation of what they were doing, the image of their product. And Coinslot here is literally saying our product is tainted. Image is all important, and public opinion can be swayed by effective presentation. And just on this top bit at the top here, newspaper editors used to wrongly linking arcades with suicide, drug addiction, and other social grievances. Remember that. Gambling in the UK causes significant societal harms, including widespread debt, mental and physical health issues, relationship breakdowns, job loss, and increased crime, costing the economy billions annually. Or if you are Coinslot, the newspaper editors used to wrongly linking arcades with suicide, drug addiction, and other social grievances. Again, it's the choice of language, that it's a grievance. If you're upset, if you think, hang on a minute, we've got a problem here, we've got suicide, we've got drug addiction, we've got job loss, we've got relationship breakdowns, we've got all kinds of societal harms, you use the word grievance instead. And as they say there, because it's all about image and effective presentation. Now, this was an interesting one from October 1992. I will leave this on screen there for long enough for you to pause and read it if you want to. Now, the AWP was actually struggling at this point, and this has been part of the story of the AWP over the years, is that they've been constantly trying to maintain revenues and grow the market. And they found that as the price of play and jackpots were getting bigger, they were struggling more, and that there was resistance amongst people to spend as much as was being asked to play these machines. And the way that the industry responded to that was making them more addictive. Now, I'm not going to go too deeply into this because this is going to be something for another video, with the development and implementation of streak mechanics, deliberate streak mechanics, which actually came in the £4.80 era. So the £4.80 and £6 era was marked very much by the development of big streaks. So you can have a read of that there if you want to. I'm going to go into that further in depth in a proper video that will cover that topic more comprehensively. But there's one element of that I will pick out, because that's part of that article there, and it says this. Listen to these numbers, because this surprised me. It is noted that machines contribute between 20% and 50% of a pub's net profit. Or, put another way, half the reason for buying a pub is to put 2 or 3 machines in it. Well, some things never change, do they? That article was from October 1992. There's a spoons in November 2025. And it's still going on. I've talked before about how Private Eye has been very good in covering this, and how the gambling industry made sure it infiltrated and compromised the Labour Party when it became obvious that they were going to win the last general election. They made sure that they were doing the corporate schmoozing, getting the money and donations and all the rest of it, so that we now have Lisa Nandy, who is the Culture Secretary. She is the MP for Wigan. Wigan is quite a poor area, and it has its own gambling problems. But when she was giving evidence in an interview recently, she said, "We think that gambling is a really great pastime for a lot of people in this country. It brings joy to millions," before appearing to downplay the scale of gambling harm by briefly noting that some people in particular can have their lives ruined by it. The very next day, industry regulator the Gambling Commission published its second gambling survey of Great Britain, estimating that 2.7% of Brits, or approximately 1.4 million people, have a gambling problem. The new figure is greater than the 2.5% problem gambling rate estimated by the first report published in July 2024. And I actually found that it was the oral answers to questions from October 2025, which you can find on the Parallel Parliament website. And as you can see, there's that section there, which is essentially what was just reported by Private Eye. Now, further on in that, there is a question from Sarah Olney, who is the Lib Dem MP for Richmond Park. And she says, people across the UK are suffering in silence with gambling addictions. The proliferation of online betting has only added to the issue, as people are able to wager more money than they can afford with just a click on their phone screen. Will the Minister speak to her colleague, the Chancellor, in advance of the upcoming budget to support the Lib Dems' call for a double gambling tax, which would not only raise millions of pounds, but disincentivise harmful gambling? To which Lisa Nandy replied, the government have wasted no time in taking action to increase the amount of support available to the minority of people for whom gambling becomes a problem. As I said to the Honourable Member for Old Bexley and Sidcup, gambling brings joy to millions of people and is an incredibly important part of the UK economy, but we are determined to ensure that support is there for that minority of people. So there is at least an acknowledgement that there's a problem there. And yes, it is true. It is a minority of people that will develop a significant gambling addiction. But when you're talking about 2.7% of people in Britain, you get a number of 1.4 million people. That is an awful lot of people who are suffering with an addiction to a product that is legal, highly available, widely advertised, and essentially seems to live outside the realms of the way that we would ordinarily control something that is this dangerous. And I bring you back again to the example of cigarettes, which are now basically locked away and you can't even see them when you go to the shops. And we can never ever rely on the industries involved with any of these things, be they cigarettes or alcohol or gambling or even pharmaceuticals. There's a good video here about this drug called Vioxx, which was a treatment for osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. The company that made it, Merck, knew before it even went to market that there were issues with it. And once it had gone to market, it made an absolute fortune. But the evidence was stacking up behind the scenes. They knew that this was a really dangerous drug and it was killing people. And they fought it every step of the way. They made public pronouncements that the drug was safe. It ended up with massive class action lawsuits in America. And it finished with one of those really weird agreements whereby they ended up paying huge amounts of money in a settlement, but didn't confess to having done anything wrong. Nobody went to jail. Nobody got done for it. Merck essentially just paid out a small amount of money relative to the amount that they had made from the drug and essentially got away with it, having lied their asses off knowingly about how dangerous it was. Again, sounds familiar, doesn't it? And just for cigarettes again, to give you an idea of how farcical this can get, and I am making this connection here because I think gambling now is in this space, and I'm wondering if there's going to come a point where we're going to look at how prevalent and easily accessible gambling is today in society, and look at it in the same way that we look at how smoking was. I remember when I was young, smoking advertisements. I remember walking to school, to and from school, there were billboards advertising cigarettes. I remember the reg, it's still stuck in me bloody head. That guy with the bald head and the comb over who was doing silly things advertising Regal cigarettes. That's always stuck with me. There were these cigarettes in the 1950s, Kent cigarettes, who made a filter, and I promise you I'm not making this up. They made up a filter for their cigarettes to say our cigarettes are healthier, and they put asbestos in it. They put asbestos in a cigarette filter and then advertised it.
Rob, I got it. If you want to show folks how Kent satisfies best, just kind of make like you're on a hammock and lie back and smile.
How will they know what I'm smiling about?
Because you're smoking Kent cigarettes. Everybody knows that Kents have the best combination of filter action and satisfying taste.
You mean I just show them the micronite filter and take a puff and everybody will know that Kent satisfies best?
Yeah. Good, now smile. I told you it worked.
So that was the filter made of asbestos. And also remember this bit here. Image is all important and public opinion can be swayed by effective presentation. And they acknowledge here that they're talking about a tainted product, which was UK fruit machines being playable by children. And indeed promoted to children. You could just walk in off the street into a seaside arcade and play fruit machines as a child. Now, this talk of taxes being raised on online gaming came up at Casino Meister recently. We had a good chat about it over at Casino Meister. Now, a lot of the objections to this, honestly, were kind of like, well, this is going to make it worse for me, isn't it? Because my RTP is going to go down, or I'm going to get fewer bonuses. Generally speaking, the online gambling landscape is going to be made worse for me, which honestly may be true, but I think we have to get beyond that mindset, because that is very much a how does this affect me, when I think we have to look at it against that backdrop. I think we're there now with cigarettes. Like, in my lifetime, I have seen smoking going from something that kind of just most people did, heavily advertised, heavily promoted, very accessible, to where as a society we reached a tipping point and said, you know what, this stuff is just too dangerous, it kills too many people, it causes too much harm, we're going to regulate the shit out of it, make it very expensive, and really try and encourage people not to do it, but falling short of banning it completely. My contention here is that gambling needs to go into the same space. It's just too dangerous. And in a world where we're still making gambling accessible to children via these family entertainment centres at the seaside, it's not something, to my mind, that we can afford to ignore. And taxing the industry at a level that reflects the harm it does, I think, is part of that. So my interjection to that thread was as follows. I'm finding it hard to give too much of a shit about this. Whichever way you want to slice it, gambling is a societally useless pastime. Best case scenario is that people won't lose too much, will get a modicum of entertainment, and not fall into any of the bear traps that gambling represents to the individual, and therefore by extension to wider society, because none of us exists in a vacuum. I say this as someone who still enjoys having a gamble online, but it's not an activity I can particularly defend on any level, and if it disappeared from the world tomorrow, I wouldn't really be sad. There's also the inconvenient truth that any gambling institution, be it online or land-based or wherever, relies on a disproportionately small number of addicts to keep the business afloat. Remove the addicts, distressed players, and those who are gambling more than they can afford, and there's not really a viable business model remaining. The industry even has a term for people who lose the lot, which is playing to extinction. Now, in this bit here, I'm actually talking about the video I'm making there, because I posted this back in November, and this is when I was starting to put together the video that you're watching right now. I'm currently researching the next video for my channel. I have access to a large number of historical Coinslot magazines and other UK gambling industry publications, and it's interesting to see that there's been a long-running and continual conflict between the industry in the UK and those who were suggesting, hang on folks, maybe we've got a problem here. And I'm talking right back to the 1970s. One of the major flashpoints in the UK was amusement arcades and the accessibility of gambling to children via fruit machines, where the industry would routinely argue with a straight face that children being able to walk into what were effectively junior casinos was perfectly fine, thank you very much. With online casinos, no one is remotely suggesting that it's an activity that should be available to children, so there's that at least. But given the irrefutable evidence of the multiple harms that gambling addiction causes in the UK on an ongoing basis, which the rest of society very much has to pick up the expensive pieces of, having the industry tip a bit more cash into the pot in the form of taxation seems entirely reasonable to me. We live in a country where 39% of adults have £1,000 or less in savings, and 16% have no savings at all. I recently decided to go up against Who's the Bride and play it until I got a wild line. I got over £1,000 in the hole on 18p spins, and by the time it finally coughed a wild line, a double no less, that resulted in a £1,072 bonus, I was still a bit down. And that's on the full-fat 96.82% RTP version. The spin that paid that bonus is the last spin I ever did on the game. Now that's entirely within my financial means and was neither here nor there in monetary terms. But for 39% of adults in the UK, that tussle would have completely wiped them out financially. So overall, this tax hike on the industry isn't something I'll be losing any sleep over. Now that thread goes on for quite a bit more. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. One thing that I do want to draw your attention to though is this post by Dunover. Now remember, Dunover is more on the industry side of things. He's a staff member at Casino Meister. There are affiliation things going on and stuff like that. He's got a link in his SIG to fast-paying casinos, so you've got all that kind of stuff going on. But fair play to Dunover, he still made this reply, which has got quite an important truth in it. It's true enough what I said before, that Chopley IOM alluded to, in that a disproportionate amount of profits within the online industry are gleaned from a small percentage of the players. I found this out as an affiliate, that the convenient ethical position of being able to maintain that I earned a little each from a lot of customers never came to pass. Ultimately, that's due to human behaviour, or more to the point, behaviour of certain players. You can try and protect those if they need or wish to be protected, and there are numerous regulatory and online tools to assist with this. Trouble is, the carousel never stops turning, and there is a constant stream of replacements for those people. The one positive here is that the replacements, in terms of high-value players, tend to spend less than before, and that is mainly due to the restrictions mentioned above, which sadly isn't as positive as I made it sound, due to the fact they can find places to gamble outside the sphere of those protections and measures. And I've put together 3 summaries here about 3 different things. So have a look at the documents on your screen. This is a summary of illegal drug use in the UK and the societal harms it causes. You can see there we've got crime, we've got fatalities, we've got physical and mental health, we've got the fact that it affects the most vulnerable of society, socioeconomic deprivation, family instability, homelessness, and the lack of education or falling out of the education system. That's for illegal drug use. There's gambling, which we've already seen. And can you see there, it's a lot of the same points. It's hitting a lot of the same harms. And also, let's not forget our old friend alcohol. Alcohol harms in the UK create massive societal costs, estimated at over £27 billion annually, impacting healthcare, the justice system, social services, lost productivity, affecting everyone, even non-drinkers, disproportionately affecting vulnerable groups, physical health issues, mental health problems, violence, family breakdown, unemployment and homelessness, leading to the alcohol harm paradox where deprived communities suffer more despite potentially lower average consumption. Can you see there? These three are almost interchangeable. And one of the items on the list there is illegal drug use. And with alcohol, for example, one of the conversations that's come up at Desert Island Fruits recently, because we were generally like old blokes of about the same age, and I think people are getting a little bit of the rose-tinteds on about the death of the great British pub and the local pub and all the rest of it. And I get it. It is sad in a way, but when you grew up in that environment and the pub was part of the landscape in which you were sort of grow up and hit your teenage years, your formative years, all that stuff. But I don't get too dewy-eyed about it. And I'm not kind of the fact that young people today are turning their back on that drinking culture and aren't really doing it. Because I'm in my 50s now. A lot of my sort of friends and family, similar sort of age, and they've got children in their teens and 20s. And it's true. Young people today do not see going out to the pub and getting pissed as being a great time. And I don't see that as being a bad thing any more than I would see, a reduction in gambling, the complete prohibition of gambling being accessible to children. That would be a good thing as well. Now, I'm not saying that we should ban all this stuff. Ultimately, we should be in a society where adults are free to choose for themselves what they do as long as they're not harming anyone else. But as we can see with all of these things, that all too often addiction to any of these things will harm other people as well. And that's why in the space which, if you want to smoke now, if you really want to smoke, you still can, but it's kind of awkward to do so. This is very personal for me because my dad died of smoking. It's as simple as that. Smoking killed my dad. He was dead at 71. My dad would still be alive if he hadn't been a lifelong heavy smoker. He should still be with us. He should still be having a chat to me on the phone, visiting the Isle of Man. We'll see him over there when we go across, whatever it may be. He's dead because he was addicted to smoking. So when I see them locked away behind the roller blinds in the Co-op or wherever, and I see the horrible pictures on the packets and all the rest of it, I'm like, good. That's exactly how it should be. And again, all this stuff is known. All this stuff was being talked about. Here's a short blast of a song called 15 Years by a group called The Levellers.
And the victims of their world are advertised on posters just to be trying a pretty girl. You just take this potion. It's another week till this check comes through. It's gonna find a left now to spend on food. The doors of the bars are open, then he breaks another rule. When he sits on a stool that bears his name, it's got a favourite glass, well it's called the same. He's never been kept waiting, 'cause he pays a landlord's wage. And the lapse in...
Now, I don't want this video to come over as some kind of puritanical call to arms of let's ban everything. I don't want to go in that direction at all. But I think there is a lot of stuff here that as a society we should be having a better conversation about. I do not trust commercial interests, anything to do with corporations, the big gambling corporations, drug corporations, tobacco industry, tobacco lobby, alcohol, whatever it may be. They have got billions and billions and billions of pounds, and they will use that money to leverage in any way they can the corruption of the regulatory processes of government, of any body that's supposed to keep a lid on their business activities, their ability to make money, they will kick very, very hard against that, and they do not care who they hurt along the way. So we need to balance that out. We need to have a balance of people being free to choose what they want to do with their own time, money and bodies, but also recognising that some stuff is just really, really dangerous. We're looking at some old arcade footage here, which was just part of the furniture in the 1980s. Children gambling in amusement arcades was just normal. It was normalised. Everyone just seemed to accept it. But as we saw there in those old coin slots, right the way through the decades, there have been people saying, no, this isn't right. We should be doing something about this. We should be putting some checks and balances and controls on this. My other issue that I have with a lot of this stuff is that people very often, almost invariably, get involved with it when they are young. If you look at, for example, the statistics on smoking, people who do not start smoking when they are young almost never take up smoking later in life. The same goes for gambling and alcohol addictions. They almost always, like the numbers are startling, I'll put them up on the screen for you, that it is practically unheard of for people to get addicted to these things later in life. These are habits that are formed when people are young, either when they're a child or in their teenage years. So at the very least, what I'm saying here is that we should be putting as many protections as we can to give people the chance to get out of those formative years and make a more informed decision when they get older. In my case, I was relatively late. Going from that thread over at Fruit Forums, that the real price of fruit machines, the vast majority of people at Fruit Forums who reported in that thread, they say that they got addicted to machines when they were children, often introduced to that by their parents or grandparents in the arcades or whatever. I was fairly late in that I was 16 when I started gambling in earnest, but now that I'm in my early 50s, this is a conversation that me and Mrs. Degsy had recently, because we got together when we were both 20 years old. And one of the things we said is, God almighty, we were just kids. We were just children. That's part of the reason, just to spread it out a little bit. We've both done shit to each other over the years. We've both made our boo-boos over the years, and we've forgiven each other completely for that. And one of the reasons, not just the fact that we love each other and we want to be together, we want to carry on as a couple for as long as we possibly can until one of us shuffles off this mortal coil. But a big part of that is just how young we were. We've said to each other, we were kids. There's so much that we didn't know. And it's like being young is hard enough. There's so much stuff that you have to get a handle on. There are so many difficult things that you have to navigate as you go through your childhood and your teenage years into early adulthood. The whole world is a minefield. There's so much stuff that's just waiting to trip you up. And I don't think it's particularly controversial to say that, you know what, one of those challenges that young people face shouldn't be the easy accessibility to gambling. And as I showed you earlier on in the video, whilst we're looking at footage here from the late 1980s, in seaside arcades today, you have access to multiplayer, ticket machines with top boxes and digital cabinets that literally are just copies of what you would play in the pub. And I don't think it's reasonable to expect young people to navigate that, because far too many people are going to become part of that significant minority who will suffer considerable harm from gambling addiction, all the way up to and including death. There's a film that I watched the other night. This just came out of one of those sort of happy coincidence things. It's called It's Never Over, Jeff Buckley. And there was a scene in that where the lass he was with at the time, his partner at the time of his death, was extensively interviewed for the film. And she had a little speak about how young they were. Now, Jeff Buckley, by all accounts, didn't kill himself. But he did do a very stupid thing. He went out to swim in a river when he was fully clothed in a moment of inspiration, and he drowned. One of those daft things that probably seems like a good idea when you're that young. But it was the way that this lady expressed it that really caught me, and I think it probably puts this across better than I can. Related directly to this point of what we should be inflicting upon young people and what we should and shouldn't be expecting them to be able to deal with. I'd ask you please to look at the emotion on this lady's face, the way her whole body conveys that emotion when she says, "We were so young." And that's what I'm trying to get across in this video. That's why I find the concept of child gambling so abhorrent, because it is not something that should exist. We can argue about what form it takes in the adult space, fine, what rules and regulations, taxes, all the rest of it. We can have that debate about how accessible it should be, so on and so forth. But when it comes to kiddie gambling, which is still available in FEC's family entertainment centres in the UK now, hard ban, get rid of it.
We were so young. Like, all of those things that felt so urgent and scary, those fall away. And, I would have loved to see him have those things fall away.
So there you go. I think that kind of boxes this one off for me now. I do have this fabled list that I keep on talking about. I do genuinely have a list of videos that I want to get through, just covering machines more than anything else, having a chat about various subjects that have been in the world of fruit machines over the years. So my hope with this video is that I've reached a conclusion with it now, which I guess if you were trying to do a quick summary would be that there is, inverted commas, too much gambling in society. It's too accessible. The fact it's still available to children is disgusting. And we need to have a full-on, top-down look about the role of gambling in society, its accessibility, how we deal with it, how we tax it, how we regulate it, and ultimately that it needs to be in that super controlled space, for me, where cigarettes and tobacco are, is that we've reached that understanding as a society. This stuff is dangerous. It needs to be absolutely off limits 100% for children and highly regulated and controlled in the adult space, because it's too dangerous to be tolerated in any other form. I'm not particularly optimistic. I don't trust the politicians in the UK to do the right thing. The industry will spend anything and everything it needs to maintain the access to people that it currently has, its ability to advertise, its ability to promote itself, its ability to evade taxation and any other form of responsibility and accountability for the harm it causes. So against that backdrop, more than ever, it's up to us to do it. And also to be aware of those around us. When I did that little sort of casting my net out before about the gamblification of everything, be aware of that, be it friends, family, children, that relatives, that sort of thing. There needs to be an awareness here of what's going on and how susceptible we are at a sort of instinctual level to gambling, and a completely immoral corporate culture that will put gambling mechanics into anything and everything in an attempt to make as much money as possible. And they don't have to worry about the collateral damage. They aren't the ones who have to deal with it. They don't have to deal with the fallout. They don't have to deal with the harm and the suffering and the suicides and all the rest of it. And they'll squeal like pigs if they're even asked to tip up their fair share in the form of taxation, and start crying off about how, oh, well, we'll have to close betting shops in the high street if you increase taxes on us. And I'm like, yeah, and what, we're supposed to be sad about that, are we? Or fewer betting shops? Well, what a terrible prospect that is. So there you go. I think I will now finish this one off. It's gone on, looking at me Bandicam here, it is quite a long one. I've tried to be as respectful of your time as I possibly can be, but I did have a lot of stuff that I wanted to get in as well. I'm going to finish you off with a montage. You can't go wrong with a montage, can you? As South Park and Team America are so fond of saying, I've already made the montage. So it's going to be related to everything that I've talked about in the main video. So the points that I hit in the montage will be very much a sort of culmination of everything that I've talked about in a short music-backed form. With the goal being that the next video on the channel will just be something simple about an old bloody fruit machine. And going forward, I'll try and do more of that stuff, but the thing that kicked this whole thing off for me, the whole thought process and thought that there's another video that needs to be made on that, was when Slots Magic over at Desert Island Fruits showed those pictures of the digital cabs, the literal just digital slot machines for children paying out tickets in a local arcade. So I felt I had to get this one done. It is done now, so I'll try and move on to the next thing. So thank you very much for watching. Do hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch up with you next time. But for now it is goodbye.
Fuck off! What do you want to bend this for?
Con nai phao over there. You know, I got nai phao nothing. I got nai phao inside nothing. Ôi ơi ơi.
The industry mustn't be given the job of policing itself, and that's a powerful lesson from the inquest. 86% of its profits come from just 5% of its customers, those who are addicted or at risk of harm. The conflict of interest is clear. Now, last time, the industry was tasked to develop a similar harm reduction tool, GamStop. They dragged their heels for 6 years, and it failed.
Let me begin my questioning on the matter of whether or not nicotine is addictive. Let me ask you first, and I'd like to just go down the row, whether each of you believes that nicotine is not addictive. I heard virtually all of you touch on it, and just yes or no. Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Mr. Johnston.
Congressman, cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction. There is no intoxication.
We'll take that as a no, and again, time is short. If you could just, I think each of you believe nicotine is not addictive. We just would like to have this for the record.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
Problem gambling completely obliterates people's finances and affects more than just the gambler, because as they beg, borrow, or steal to continue their addiction, they affect everyone around them. And I do mean steal. Roughly half of gambling addicts will commit a crime, and most of those crimes are to continue gambling, often leading to a spiral where the addict doesn't see a way out, which is why problem gambling has one of the highest suicide rates of any substance addictions. Full stop.